Hello, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you for being here today. Today, I'm doing a talk especially for authors, because I've been getting this question a lot, sort of out of the blue in the last couple of months. So, as I was having individual meetings with writers, instead, I thought I'll do it as a YouTube talk so that, you could refer to it whenever you need to, and then you can reach out to me if you need to beyond that. But today's talk is you've written your novel. Now what? How do you then take it to a screenplay format or take it to market in film and television? Before I start, who the hell am I? I'm Daniela Saioni. I have helped a number of first-time writers and more experienced writers and novelists as well. I've trained them in screenwriting, or I have story edited their projects. I've essentially helped a lot of new writers take their concept through to a screenplay stage, through to a lookbook, and then they enter the business. I've helped people in film and television. I'm a member of the Writers Guild of Canada. I'm a screenwriter myself. I'm also a story consultant, so I will work one-on-one with a writer and or director at different stages of the process. So that's why people do come to me for this kind of knowledge. So today I will take you well, first of all, if you have written a book and finished it, congratulations. I think that's the hardest part. I think the hardest part is creating that intellectual property in the first place. So if you're watching this, you probably have a book and you probably have even published it at this stage, which is phenomenal. Like that is beyond what most people get to. So whenever a writer comes to me with that and says, okay, now how do I sell this? I often wonder why they often don't consider writing the screenplay themselves. Because we'll talk through different options at different stages different decisions you need to make at different stages along the way. But I believe the old adage, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a night. Teach a man to fish, he can eat for life. Like sometimes clients come to me to hire me as a story editor to help them rewrite or write their script. I can coach them along the way. But it's so, and maybe I have this perspective particularly because I am a screenwriting teacher and because I've seen it help people over and over again. I don't know, but I don't know why it's not people's first thought to, well, why don't I just learn how to write the script myself? I'll give you arguments for and against that along the way today. But obviously, I think if you have the determination and talent and ability to write a novel, it is easily transferable to screenwriting. Some of my most successful comedy writing students, I focus on comedy writers in my work, although I do get people working with me as a story editor and even entering my comedy writing classes who write in all different genres. I've seen novelists really excel in because I train stand-ups, just regular people, actors do really well too, actually. But novelists tend to do really well because they have developed a whole bunch of the skill sets that are part of the skill sets you need to write a screenplay. So I always think like, why isn't it your first thought to write the script? But okay, so you've written your novel. You may have even gotten it published. It may even be a #1 bestseller. I've had a few students do that. So if it is, how can you then, if you have a dream of seeing it as a film or TV production, what now? Okay, fair question. A question I've been getting more and more lately. So if you decide at this point you don't want to write the screenplay, your next mission is to get it straight to market. Now, when you're being paid as the novelist and not the screenwriter, it's not as much, unless you're like a super famous novelist. Listen, I get it if you're like, well, you can pick any of like the ones that are household names. If you're someone like that, Stephen King, of course, you're going to get a lot of money for your book. And if you're Stephen King, you're probably writing the screenplay anyway, because he's also a great screenwriter. But unless you're someone like that who is a household name, you're probably not going to get as much money just to get the rights to your book. When you take your book to market, who you are looking for is you're going to look for a producer, like a production company, to then team up with to actually buy the rights to your book, the rights to develop your book into a screenplay, and then pitch it in Hollywood and all of that. Now, I thought this was really important talk to do today because a few weeks ago, someone alerted me to something that's going on in the US right now, which I find really shocking. So we're going to talk about that. Remember, you shouldn't be the one paying. You should be the one getting paid. You're the author. It's your intellectual property. Yes, you can pay a writer to write a screenplay based on your book. Of course, I guess that's always an option. But normally it's a producer who does that. The producer who says, I want your book. I see this as a movie. First of all, you don't want just any producer, right? You want to team up with someone who shares your vision. Now, of course, this depends. How much control do you want in the process? No one has ultimate control. Like ultimately, the director has probably, the director producer, I should say, has the most control. But sometimes it's the network or the studio that has the most control. Sometimes it's your star. Like there's so many other people that have their hands in the pie in the making of a motion picture or a TV series, that ultimately it's not like you're going to have so much control anyway. But if you option your book right away to the producer, like you're basically giving them your baby and trusting them with it, right? So you want to make sure that you at least trust them, trust that they have a similar vision. Like if you, have a vision for your story, how it will be translated to film, and even a great producer can't guarantee that it's going to be brilliant and amazing, but at least if they share your vision, your tastes, your so many things, and if they have the experience and the ability to raise the financing to make it right. So anyone could say, I'm a producer, and a lot of people have I have a production company. A lot of people have companies. A lot of people can say they're producers. Look at their research the producers and companies you want to work with. You think about projects that you love that are aligned with the genre that you write in. And again, like there's tools to help you research this stuff. I often do my research on IMDb Pro. I have an IMDb Pro subscription. I read the trades, right? I work in film and television. I've been in the industry for 34 years. So if I don't know the person, I will ask around because I know pretty big people in the industry, but ask around, do the research, use the Google, get to know the track record of this. Is like either if you're going to approach them or if they are approaching you, because that could happen either way, right? Someone might just love your book and call you up. So I don't know if it's a scam or a new model. This company pitched an author this thing that is a quote unquote new model. I personally have to believe it's a scam, but maybe it's a new model. Beware. There are people in Hollywood nowadays saying, hey, we love your book. We'd love to see it made into a motion picture. If you pay us six-figure sum, we will develop it into a screenplay for you and pitch it to Hollywood producers. An author wrote to me on an email and said, is this legit? As far as I know, it's not legit. I mean, you could theoretically pay someone to develop your work into a screenplay. Yes, it's not going to cost you six figures. You'll make an agreement with a writer. And listen, if you do it the other way, where you reach out to a screenwriter that you like, you make an agreement together and you get to choose your writer. When you do it the way that this company was proposing, they're hiring the writer. They're then getting ownership of your work and you're paying them to do that. They're getting co-ownership in this kind of new model. Using the word loosely, beware. It's your intellectual property, right? It's your book is the prize. Obviously, it's going to change. It's going to be adapted. You are going to need a talented producer on board. You're going to need a talented screenwriter, or you might be the talented screenwriter. And I'll tell you the objections I hear for that. And then sometimes when people go, you know what, I'm going to try it, and then they do it, then they realize, oh, I was putting roadblocks up in my own way. So yeah, it's beware. You shouldn't be paying a producer would be paying you. If a producer wants to option your novel, you will drop an agreement. You need an entertainment lawyer at that point, right? So ask around, get recommendations. There are some great entertainment lawyers right here in Toronto, and you might be tuning in from anywhere. There's fantastic entertainment lawyers in all different parts of the world. Team up with one, especially if you've got an offer. If someone comes to you with an offer, you definitely need a lawyer at that point. You might preemptively decide, okay, I am going to be submitting my book to various producers. You may also, by the way, go the route of submitting your book to a literary agent who specializes in securing film and TV deals, right? Sometimes people don't have as much patience for that. And, you know, I like, in a way I get that, but I also think, I mean, it's a legitimate thing to do. Instead of approaching producers directly, approaching a literary agent. It can sometimes be harder actually to get a literary agent in Canada. It's easier in the States for some reason. But if you can, find someone who has sold books before and deals in your genre. There is a famous lawyer / producer in Canada who holds the rights to hundreds and hundreds of books, and he's very respectable. He's a great lawyer. I don't think he's actually sold a single book for someone, unfortunately. So you know, look for people who have actually sold books in the genre that you work in, or at least to recognizable people, and meet with 1, 2, or 3 of those people and decide, and they'll decide also if it's a good fit, right? Like anything, it's a partnership when you team up with a literary agent. So the literary agent route is one way. It's not the easiest way, but it is one way. Another way is to go and pitch production companies yourself. And then you're going to have to decide at that point what you want. Do you want to stay on and be the screenwriter? Do you want to be involved with the screenwriting process in some way? Do you want to you let the producer just hire whoever they want? These are all things to decide and talk about, because you've got to set up your expectations with the company you're working with. Some producers want ultimate control. They know great writers, and if you trust them, go for it, right? And some producers are more open to the writer being involved. It really is, it all depends. And you have choices. You can choose at what point to let go of the control you have over the project. You want to think about, if you do hand over your book for option. So an option agreement gives the producer the right to raise money and approach funding agencies and other financing opportunities to raise money to pay a writer and develop your project, and for a specified time period. So option agreements can be, like, often I would say, I mean, it really is project dependent, but I would say most producers will ask for at least 3 years, because it takes a few years to get a project developed, right? So most producers will ask for a 3-year option agreement. They might ask you for a shopping agreement. So shopping agreements, so an option agreement or a shopping agreement, money has to change hands in the sense that they need to pay you something. It's usually not a lot at that point, especially if it's a shopping agreement. To make it legal in Canada, they have to give you at least $1. I've had one of those deals where the producer slid a loonie across the table. But you know, it can be $1,000. It can be, it's negotiable, but it's usually not a lot of money at that point, because it's in book form. It's not in screenplay form. Once again, if you want to stay on, write the screenplay, and it's a brilliant screenplay, or it's at least very good, you'll get a lot more money at that stage. And even so, some option agreements are still very low. It just really, really depends. If there's a bidding war for your script or your book, obviously you'll get more. But the point is that people should be paying you for the right to shop your book around and exclusively represent you, or for the right to actually option and develop it over a set period of time. Now, during that period of time, most producers will negotiate like a first right of renewal to renew the option under certain terms. You definitely need a lawyer involved to have your best interests represented, because you're going to negotiate things like your credit, payment schedule. So you'll get paid when it's optioned. You'll get paid when the option is renewed. You'll get paid on the first day of principal photography. Usually, you'll get paid when the film is released, and you may or may not be able to negotiate royalties. It's pretty rare for an author to get royalties, I would say, even for a screenwriter to get royalties. But I have seen it. Like, My Big Fat Greek Wedding wasn't a book, but it was a film with a brand new writer, and she was able to negotiate 1% royalties. So you can imagine, because the film went on and did $647 million. I was the script supervisor on that film, so that's how I know. So yeah, if she hadn't negotiated that royalties deal, it would have been a lot less money, right? So credit, you might negotiate for the right to be in the room when it's being pitched. Some producers will not like that. Some producers will insist on it, especially if it's a book where you are from a very specific viewpoint or culture, or where your presence in the room is quite necessary. If it's a true story based on your life, you probably want to be there when it's to pitch it. I mean, it depends, right? Yeah, all of this is negotiable. So if you're handing your book over to a producer at that stage, definitely get a lawyer on board. Definitely make those choices. Now, if you want to do the second thing, or the second option, which is now write the screenplay yourself, often when a writer comes to me and they say, yeah, I wouldn't even know where to begin, I'm like, hello. Hello, I'm Daniela Saioni. No, I have taught people from scratch. I mean, like, people who have never, ever written a script. And I am a super process nerd. So I was a script supervisor for most of my career. So for 33 years, a very, very different job than writing. I work on set with the director to ensure that the story gets told visually, that it's going to match. I represent the editor on set. When I began screenwriting, it was a good 12 years into my career on set. And I was really frustrated. I had some really high-end training, but I was still very frustrated by the lack of process in that training. So over the years, I developed a process that I was really confident in that got me high-level results. Like, I don't know, have stopped counting. I have something like 15 laurels now from screenwriting competitions. I've won a few of the big ones. I have had 3 projects optioned. That's how I got into the Writers Guild of Canada. You can't get into the Writers Guild without a deal in place. So that's how I did it. Although I personally haven't had anything produced other than stuff I've produced myself, but a number of my students have gone into option deals, and they're not, I don't, yes, actually, no. Some of them have had stuff produced in Canada. There's a new deal pending in the UK with someone with a big company that of a script that I loved, first-time writer, actor. So, but a couple of times in my classes, it has been novel, actually 3 times. 2 of them quite notable Canadian novelists, and once an American novelist who's now publishing her 5th book. But I helped her develop one of her first novels into a TV pilot. So how do you decide? That's a big decision. If you're going to write the script yourself, how do you decide? And people always say, "Oh, it's going to take me too long. I'm too old," or "I don't have the time to go back to school." The program that I've used to train the people, to train everybody, since I've been teaching screenwriting specifically since 2012, is 20 hours long. So it's a 20-hour, I've got the process down to a process that I love, that has worked really well for me, and that it is a repeatable process that I've seen work for a lot of different kinds of writers. Now, I'm not saying it's for everybody in the world, but like, if you at least give it a try as your first way in, or a new way in to writing a screenplay faster, because maybe you have tried to write a screenplay and you're like, this is a lot. It's so much. You've tried to do it on your own. You've read all the books. You even took a class. A lot of the classes I took were with great teachers, but they didn't have a process. They just expected us to just write brilliant pages, right? Consider giving me a try. It's 20 hours, and we do a year of idea jams, meaning you can hop on to idea jams with peers throughout the course of a year. More on that later. It will not take you a year to write your draft of your script, by the way. It'll take you a few months, to be honest. Like, I taught that course in 5 weeks when I used to teach it live. Now that it's online, you can go at your own pace. But when I taught it in 5 weeks, usually I would say 60% of people were able to finish a script in 5 weeks. That's very fast. If it's your first time, I would give yourself 3 months, right? So give yourself, I would say, the training and then 3 months to actually execute the screenplay. If that still sounds like a lot and you're in a hurry, I have to warn you about how long it takes for films to get developed, financed, and made. It can be a 10-year journey. Hopefully, it's like more like a 3 to 5 year journey, but it can be a 10-year journey. It can even be a 20-year journey. So, films take time because you're talking about millions of dollars usually, right? So, okay, so let's say you're like, okay, I can consider writing the screenplay myself, learning how to do it and writing it myself, and then once I have a strong screenplay, then taking it to market, I can get with that. What are the next set of decisions you're going to make? So if you're at that thinking, that kind of thought process, then you have to decide: is this a TV series? Is it a limited series? Or is it a feature film? Now, most novels, and actually novellas make phenomenal feature films, right? I'm thinking of Brokeback Mountain was a novella. There's a few novellas that have been like beautiful feature films, but novels are usually what get translated into feature film. But there have been some great ones that have been limited series. So the big difference between a television series, a limited series, and a feature film, feature films and limited series are closed stories, meaning the story resolves by the end of your book, which I'm guessing most people here who have written novels, the story resolves by the end of the book, right? Depending on how true you're going to be to the story, you're probably going to choose either a limited series, which are harder to sell for new writers, right? The Queen's Gambit was probably the best. Now, I never read the book, but like that was a phenomenal limited series, that's for sure. But yeah, most of the time you're looking at a feature film. Now, let me think of. So one of the three writers I talked about who were novelists, she created a feature. In fact, one of the features she created even before she came to me, one of her books that became a feature was nominated for an Oscar. So her name is actually on an Oscar nomination form. She didn't write the screenplay, so it was just the based on a book by. But the other two actually wrote television pilots. It is possible to create a TV series based on a book, but obviously more things will change because a TV series is an open-ended number, like it's basically 500 different stories, right? Based on the one initial IP. And now think about some of the greatest shows. Some of the greatest shows have been like one of my favorite shows was Orange is the New Black, which was based on a book. There's more than one, but Orange is the New Black is like was one of my favorite shows, and they took a lot from the book, but then they had to obviously expand it to get the 7 seasons worth of stories and take the story into new directions. And so the author would have been credited and paid a sort of a fee that they negotiated for every single episode, but it's the same idea. The author, in that case, I think they were a consultant. You can be a consultant on a show. You can also be in the writer's room, but you have to show that you can write screenplays usually for that to happen, right? I believe the writer of the book was a consultant because Genji Cohen, the showrunner, had an incredible team of TV writers but these are all things that one can negotiate. Depends how hot your intellectual property is. And by the way, I don't think this is a trend anymore, but I want to say like 3 years ago, to like 10 years ago, or maybe even sooner than that, like more recently than that, there was a trend where screenwriters would write the script and then they'd write the novel and then they'd release the novel so they could say, here's my script. You like the novel? Here's my script. That was a thing because Hollywood really does value IP, the intellectual property, especially if it's proven, especially if it finds its audience. If you've written a novel that's already found an audience, chances are high. I mean, it's more valuable, right? Than an unknown script. So if you already know that, and then you get good at screenwriting, and chances are, because you're good at writing a novel, you're probably going to be good at screenwriting. And everything is learnable, by the way. I've seen people come in with different strengths and weaknesses, and we just work on the parts that are, some people are phenomenal dialogue writers. I think actors make phenomenal dialogue writers, of everyone I've been able to help. And novelists have an innate sense of story and character, and sometimes also very, very good dialogue writers as well, if that's one of the strengths in their novel writing, in their books. It tends to become a strength in the screenwriting form. Like, people get bogged down by the format. The format itself is the easiest part. Don't let format get you bogged down. There's a program called Final Draft. There's another cheaper version of a program called Fade In. Or is it Fade Out? Anyway, both of those programs will format the script for you. This is not rocket science. That I've seen that, like, scare writers that have never written a screenplay. That is nothing. What you really want to get down is the efficiency of storytelling. So the transition you're going to make when you learn screenwriting, and that's why novellas, being shorter and being probably more efficiently told, they tend to translate very beautifully to screenplays. So there's an efficiency to the storytelling in cinema. Oh, I just realized I'm not plugged into power. Okay, hopefully we'll be okay. There's an efficiency of storytelling in cinema and television, for sure, because you have to fit the story of maybe, a 400-page novel into maybe 90 minutes. And in television, it's, 21 minutes or 45 minutes, or now with streamers, 30 minutes to an hour per story per week. It is a challenge. So when you do decide to convert your book into a screenplay, something will be changed. Probably things will get lost in translation. And if you stay on to be the screenwriter, you get to make those choices about what those things are going to be. What is most valuable to you? Is it the essence of what you're saying? Is it the character work? Is it the intricacies of the plot? I've worked on I script supervised A Simple Favor and A Simple Favor 2. I have not read the book for A Simple Favor, but the movie was it was about 2 hours and 20 minutes when we shot it, and it aired at something like just over 2 hours. And there were a lot of plot twists, and there are even more when you see A Simple Favor 2. Now, A Simple Favor 2, I think she went straight to screenplay. She might release the novel later with the film, but even more twists and turns. So you have to sort of make choices. And like, are you staying true to your genre? That was a psychological thriller. People expect it to be longer, to have a lot of plot twists. If you're writing in a different genre, obviously you're going to lean into assuming, you wrote a comedic horror novel, and people expect to see that, especially if your book has an audience, people will expect to see that essence of what made the book successful and enjoyable to an audience translated into film. So you're not going to suddenly make a drama based on a comedic horror and please your audience, right? I mean, people have done all kinds of things in the past, but probably you're going to want to respect your vision of the tone and the genre. So you're going to have to make story choices of what you keep and what you lose. You're going to probably go back and dive into the character work. Listen, even if you go and hire another writer to write the screenplay, that person needs your insight into the character work. I mean, they can create their own. I mean, we're writers, right? I can read a book or hear a director's pitch and create a whole world and create the characters. But obviously, if you are the author of the original work and you have a strong feeling about, okay, this character, the subtext of this character is always that they're going to kill themselves at any moment. And even though they're a comedic character on the page, that has a different edge. It has a different way to be executed on the page, right? If you know the sort of the backstory, the subtext, the secrets of the characters, why, sometimes when an audience reads a book, they don't know the backstory because it's not necessarily in the book. So you're going to be filling the screenwriter in, or if you're the screenwriter, you're going to start to make choices about what's important to you to keep. And you're going to have to, in novels, you're allowed to meander a lot more. You're allowed to have, this is one thing I have seen. I had other students who were novelists as well. They didn't sell their work. They were good writers too. They wrote good screenplays. They didn't necessarily sell their work. But I've seen them write really long, descriptions of the set deck. You don't need to do that. You don't want to do that in a Hollywood script or in a film or TV script. You get the luxury of doing that in a novel. You get to do things, you get to write things that we don't see on a screen. So you have to, sometimes the shift is hard for people to make, but even if you do see them on a screen, like the furniture, etc., you don't wander into a detail of the grain of the wood of the of the sofa, because that's not important. You stick to what is important. And besides, there will be a production designer eventually in the process, hired by the producer to create the look of the movie. And if the writer is telling the production designer the color of the wood, and that's just disrespectful, actually. Just like when you're telling actors how to act in the writing, we there's habits that we have to sort of adjust when we go from novelist to screenwriter. I've never been a novelist, but I have been a screenwriter. I've worked with novelists as a story editor, etc. So you want to understand what you need to do to change the story, to adapt it to the screenplay structure. I'm a process nerd, and the process I teach is essentially, I can boil it down to come up with a loose premise. This is for screenwriters who have not written a book. So if you've written a book, you already know the premise, you already know sort of the story you want to tell. You then, if you're writing for television, you're going to train in what the specificities of television are versus limited series versus feature. By the way, a limited series might be told in 7 to 10 1-hour episodes, or 7 to 10 90-minute episodes. Try to watch, if you're deciding to write a TV pilot or a limited series or a feature film for the first time, definitely try to watch some of your favorites, and then also download the scripts, and because there's scripts available online, to get to know what the writer did that you loved. Start to study it, right? In addition to studying the craft, study the craft also through things that you love, through films or TV series or limited series that you love. So yes, so you're going to make decisions about the story. I get people to start with a very loose premise, and you guys would already have it because you have your book. But because I think the most important thing for me as a writer and for me as a teacher, and what I think fuels, especially if you're going to write television, is the character work. So then we take a deep dive into the character work. I personally spend the most amount of time on the character work. I'm one of the few screenwriting teachers who actually trains people in character work. I'm always shocked to learn when people have studied with other teachers, and even when I've studied with other teachers, and they don't really have a process for character work. It's mind-boggling, really. I think you don't really you can create a plot and then fit the characters into it. I think that's the more shallow way of doing it. When you start with the characters, and by the way, if you have a novel written and you know your characters, but then you start to do the character work for the screenplay, you might come up with a whole different other angle to the story, or a different beat in the story, or a different direction, because you're going to discover something new about the character, and your screenplay might actually differ a lot more than you thought it would from the original book. Or it doesn't have to. It might be true to it. It really depends. There's an efficiency of storytelling in screenwriting. There's a clarity of character work, because especially in television, it is said that what the audience knows about the character is the setup for every single punchline. This is if you write comedy, in the entire show, right? It's like everyone is like, oh, I know what Chandler Bing is like. So I'm already laughing even before he's reacted to the thing, because I have a sense of how, and for me as a comedy writer, as comedy writers, we deal in flaws. We're in the business of character flaws, because comedic characters are flawed humans. Even if you're writing science fiction, right? It's the flawed everyman often that is the hero, right? There are different structural paradigms. There are different ways that people learn about film structure and TV structure. There's different systems, and that's fine. They all have a lot of things in common. I teach you about all of them. Like I tell you about, well, not all of them, the ones that are most common to my clients. Sometimes when clients come to me, they have an understanding of a system like Save the Cat, which you might have heard of. Save the Cat is a famous series of books by Blake Snyder, who is no longer with us. A very, very efficient way of structuring a feature film, and you can adapt Save the Cat to television. There's also a woman named Ellen Sandler who teaches TV writers in a 6 sort of beat kind of system that she has created that she believes are all the essential beats in Western storytelling. There's another famous system called the hero's journey. Usually that is more applicable to epic stories with superheroes and stuff like that. These are like books you can buy these books and read up and learn about structure. But I personally feel as a teacher and as a writer that just taking a book like that, figuring out your plot is empty. Like it's not going to lead you to the very best work. If you start with the character work, learn structure through those books or through the understanding of what all those books have in common. And I'll tell you the secrets. They all have an inciting incident that's caused by something that directly confronts your character's flaw and then sets the story in motion. And then there's a series of escalations where your character makes a series of choices. In a feature film, they transform, the character transforms. They're going after a goal. They're trying to get something they want, and instead they get probably something they need. That's how we transform in life, right? We achieve a state of being that is like just on a higher level, and there's a new order to their life, or not. Some feature films don't fully, usually your main character does have a transformation. It's an audience expectation in Western culture, but and that transformation may already be in the book, or it may not be, and you have to sort of decide: am I going to give it the full Hollywood ending, or am I going to leave it more vague? And that's there's no right or wrong. It's your script. But there is a thing about Western audiences and their expectations for storytelling. So you can basically, what we do is once we have the character work done and people study structure, then they decide sort of how they're going to structure their story, what they're going to include. So they'll look at the book, they're going to decide which scenes they're going to include. They might add some, they might take some away, but they have it into a succinct sort of what will fit into a 90-page script. People often say, well, how many scenes is that? It really depends. Are they short scenes? Are they long scenes? I worked on a show called Covert Affairs, which had 175 scenes in a 1-hour TV show. Suits was a 1-hour TV show, and we had 35 to 39 scenes in Suits. So it depends, right? Suits is a comedy with longer walk and talks and scenes. Covert Affairs was an action show with a lot of quick cuts and a lot of cut to. It really depends. So I can't say, well, you have to narrow it down to this many scenes. And then different writers will have different processes of how they structure their story. So in my program, I give you like some of my favorite ways. I love putting one scene on an index card, like each scene on an index card. Sometimes I'm so like structure is so under my skin now that I don't have to think about it as hard anymore. As long as I've set up all the characters, created an inciting incident that directly confronts their flaw, and set the story in motion, keep escalating and escalating. And because I write comedy, it's like until it gets really, really painful, because comedy is pain and truth. Then they, in feature film, they probably transform at the end. In television, they either solve the problem or not, the problem of the episode or not, and they go back to being who they are. Because in television, characters don't transform. Now, in a limited series, it's just a longer way of stretching out the closed story. So they'll transform gradually, right? But there will still be an ultimate transformation by the end of the 7 or 10 episodes. Like I said, limited series, harder to sell, but they still do. They are still making them. So you got to decide. Limited series are more expensive because they're usually very cinematic. Series can be very expensive too, or not. It really depends. And feature films, again, could be low budget or high budget. If you're a newer writer and your novel is shootable on a low budget, that's phenomenal. You're going to have more producers chasing you for it. If it's like a character driven piece and there's maybe 4 or 5 leads and not like 30 different characters. And by the way, if there are 30 different characters, then you might figure out how to make your story shootable in, $5 million to $10 million, low budget range, or even lower than that. You'll have to really, consider that things like location shooting can be expensive if it's like an exotic place like hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away. The number of characters will impact the budget, any sort of visual effects or special effects. I know there's a lot of science fiction writers watching this. Science fiction can be very expensive, but there are ways to do it more cheaply depending on what the effect is. Luckily, technology has advanced a lot, so that there's a lot more we can do in visual effects. But you want to sort of get to know what is more or less expensive. If you train with me, I can talk you through that in the program as well. What else? So once you have, yeah, you can use index cards. You can just write a treatment. Listen, to get funding in Canada, and also sometimes to get, sometimes as a writer, you can get paid when you deliver the treatment. So the treatment is a prose version of the script before you write the actual script. And in a feature film, that's anywhere between 15 and 30 pages. Like I usually hand in a treatment that's 18 to 21 pages, in that range for a feature film. And each paragraph is a scene, and you're describing for the reader what is happening on the screen in every scene. So remember, you can't write what's in the character's head. If it's important to know what's in the character's head, then you're writing voiceover or otherwise conveying it, because it's everything that ends up in the treatment, on that index card, or on the script is stuff we can see and experience as an audience. And even though there is subtext in everything, obviously great writing has subtext, there's an art to like how much or little you reveal and all of that. That's all in my program. But so once you know the story in the process that I teach, then that's the point at which I dive into the screenplay. The reason this is a fast process, before I sort of figured out my process as a process nerd, I used to sit at the typewriter. Oh, I am older. It was a typewriter. Now it's a laptop. And I would just fade in scene one and start to try to write it that way. I find that doing this kind of planning and thinking and really thinking about the character before I structure the story, it just gives me ultimate freedom. When I'm writing the script, people are like, oh, it sounds like everything's like mechanical. No, it gives me ultimate freedom because I can change. I can, as I'm writing and doing the fun part of writing the scenes. And there's a whole art to scene arcs and scene work and all of that, which I also teach. But once you're in, that's a joyful zone to be in. You're doing the scene work and you're writing the dialogue. And if you're a comedy writer like me, you're writing the jokes, although we do a final stage of punch up at the end to make it even funnier. But that is joyful when you don't have to guess where you're going. You have given yourself a roadmap that is based on real work that you did in the character work, right? And like you might be very true to your book, so that the stage of creating the story might not be a long stage at all. And even the character work, you probably have done a lot of character work as you're writing your novel, and it won't be a very arduous process at all. Actually, you might be even faster. Try to think of the 3 novelists that I can think of, they were fast. So I would imagine that would generally be the case. Even the ones who didn't sell stuff, they tended to be fast. They could give me a whole draft like faster than anyone else. So you guys are used to the hard work of writing. Yeah. And then then you do what we call a vomit pass. That's literally what it's called. It's a vomit pass. And that is because you just vomited, you just get everything out on the page in a screenplay format. It's not so vomity because we've made a lot of choices already as screenwriters. Those first drafts turn out really well usually. This one feature that I wrote for a director who came to me with a general story, but a really interesting story that was really hard to turn into a feature story. It took me 3 months to beat out his story into a feature story, but then it took me less than that to write the script. We submitted the first draft of that to contest. That's how strong we felt the first draft was. And that first draft won the first 3 awards. And then we got feedback from winning these awards about what to do for the rewrite. So when you write that vomit pass, you may be cocky like us and submit it to contests, but usually you want people to read it. Both he and I are both very film professionals, so we know what a good script reads like. So and we were able to be I'm able to be I'm able to be objective is what I'm trying to say, because I read hundreds and hundreds of scripts. But we knew it was a good one to send out. But if we weren't sure, which would be normal, that if we weren't sure, especially if we're new writers, you would give it to your peer group, you give it to people you trust who know how to read scripts, especially in the genre you write in, and have them give you notes, right? Oh, and I skipped something else. You could work with a story editor. You could work with a story editor. I am a story editor. People hire me at different stages. They'll either hire me with their treatment written, they'll hire me at the concept stage. Sometimes they'll hire me right before they're going to camera. And they'll give me a script and they're like, now we just want to zhuzh it up and make it as magic as possible. I worked with a wonderful writer director in Toronto who teaches at U of T, and she had never written a feature, but she was adapting a short story to a feature. That's another thing you can do if you write shorts, is maybe one of your shorts is really good to adapt to a feature. I mean, I was blown away by the way she changed it a lot. The original story was written by a man, and she wanted to do something a lot more feminist with it, and it was phenomenal. I thought what she did with it was phenomenal. We went through 3 drafts together. We went from concept to the treatment, and then we did 2 full drafts of the script together, and it was her first time. She gave me a beautiful testimonial. There's a testimonial video on my page in the screenwriting playlist for it's a testimonial for Story Editors Studio, which is a course where I train story editors, but it's got some testimonials from people who have worked with me as their story editor, and I was really, really proud of her for the work she did. She's an academic, and she did a lot of academic writing, and she had made short films and had written them, but had never actually trained as a writer. And I'm like the first one to champion her for every sort of film development program. I just thought her script was phenomenal. I can't wait to see it made into a film. And again, because she's not a novelist, but because she's a filmmaker, she has the opportunity to raise the money and make the film herself. That is still also something you can do if you have those skill sets. I don't know a lot of filmmakers who have written novels, but there are a few. Normally though, it's you're either writing the script yourself or hiring a screenwriter, or a producer has bought your work and they're hiring a screenwriter. The producer or the writer can hire me or somebody as the story editor at any point in that process. I've been hired either way. I've been hired by directors, I've been hired by producers, and most often I'm hired by the writers, because the writers usually were my former students, and they now have money to make things on a bigger scale, and they come back and hire me as a story editor. But yeah, so at some point, other people are working with you to make the script as excellent as possible. You want the strongest script possible. A strong script does attract attention. Now, a strong script alone won't do it for you, though. You do need to make the connections, right? Into the either through to raise money. You need to make a connection with a producer or production company. It used to be the case in Canada that we could pitch directly to a network without a producer. That is not the case anymore. That changed. I saw, because I have pitched to CBC directly before. I'm not a producer, right? I'm not I'm just a writer. So that changed. There are now new rules. CBC was the one, because it was government funded, you could do that. There are a very limited number of funding bodies that give out funds, but if you find a producer who's tapped into them, that's a great partner for you to have, or a great person to bring your project to light, to the next stage. And again, you might want to do it through Hollywood. There's more money in the US, but you might not. It really depends on the nature of your project and how much you're going to be involved. And so once you have a script you love, you've gotten feedback, it's great. You might have won awards. If you win awards, by the way, you start to get these high-level meetings in Hollywood. I had my first sort of high-level meetings in Hollywood at the age of 51. It was incredible. It was like such a surprise to me. There's no sort of age limit for writers, so it's great. It's not like, as an actor, I have different limitations. And even so, I could write myself a role someday, right? Depending on how far I get with my career. But anyway, at 51, I had my first set of high-level meetings, and I got to experience what it was like to talk to some of the more powerful managers in LA, to talk to powerful producers and production companies. If you win a contest, which is another route, I know people who have built careers on winning contests. It's not like it's harder to do. You obviously are beating out tens of thousands of people. If you win a contest, or even if you place in the finals, you're beating out tens of thousands of people. I've done that many times over, and I'm still not a produced writer. So that's how hard it is, right? Ideally, what you do is you find a producer who can see your vision, loves the screenplay. Hopefully they love the work, and together, or the producer will run with it. Someone is going to create a pitch and a lookbook. So they'll create a visual pitch through a look. A lookbook is what we call it in feature film. A pitch deck is what we call it in television. Either way, there's a visual sort of pitch that you may or may not work on with the producer. At that point, the producer's running with the ball. And if you have made an agreement with them to be in the room when it's pitched, then you might pitch together. And who you're pitching is networks and studios who can financially back the project. You might be pitching celebrities. That's like a whole other. Someone said, how do I attach a celebrity? Well, usually, like, so when Maz and I won all these awards for the film he wants to make, which is it's a brilliant, not because I wrote it, it was his story. It was a really brilliant concept. It still could get made, but we had a very specific, the lead was a Syrian war refugee who was a stand-up. We had a very specific cast. There's very few people who could play that role. And we reached out to him. He's like a B-list, C-list celebrity. And his people said the bond to sign him to this project is $250,000. That's just the bond. That's just for him to say, I'm attached to this project. So you definitely want to be dealing with a producer, a studio, or a network, I think, rather than pulling at, raising that kind of money on your own. I mean, there have been stories where people have been able to attach stars. Obviously, if a major star is in love with your script, they're going to become a producer and champion your work. Like anything this is like film and television. I've seen it all. I've seen things that they said, you can't do that. I've seen people do it and succeed. So don't ever think that you can't do something. But the regular procedure is, when you approach production companies or you approach even networks and studios, you do it through established channels. So a lot of production companies won't even look at your script or your book without a submission from a lawyer. So either a lawyer or an agent, either one, a lawyer or an agent or a manager. Agents and managers in Canada are the same thing. They serve both functions. In the United States, they're different. They're split. Their duties are split up. A manager is someone you stick with for the life of your career or for a number of years. They're career builders, and agents negotiate specific deals. Okay, so it'll be either person who's putting your script or your book in front of a production company. And then the lawyer or the agent, if you have an agent, is going to negotiate the actual deal. And then you move forward with under the terms of your contract, and you'll pitch studios. There'll be all kinds of, it's a journey, it's a trip. So how much you want to be involved in that journey, like as a screenwriter, how much you want, or as just to say, hey, you know what, I wrote the book, this is what I do, give it to the experts to decide. Just make sure you're involving good people, talented people along the way as much as you can. There's very little control we have in the end. All we can control is when we bring it to market. So you want to bring your book or script to market when it's at a really good place. You don't want to bring like an okay script to market. And that's a fear people have if they write the script themselves. They're like, oh, I'm a great novelist, or I'm an okay novelist, but I'm not a good screenwriter. Like, how do you know until you do it? And like I said, in the past 2 years alone, I've been teaching screenwriters since 2012. So 12 years. In the past 2 years alone, I've had 4 different people, first-time writers. I'm only talking about the first-time writers because I've also had people with more experience sell shows. I've also had clients who are not my students, but they were clients sell shows. In Canada, I had a client create a limited series, and I said to him, it's really hard to get a limited series made in Canada. He got a producer attached within 3 months. We worked on the pitch deck together. We worked on shaping the story. He's not a writer. He's a producer. Like, he was not even a producer. He was someone who wanted to see this project made, therefore became the producer, but also pitched it to a legit, like, top Canadian producer, and it's getting made. And it's like, it's really hard to get limited series made. It's hard to get historical, like period pieces are more expensive. he did it. So if that person could do it, and also, like, I've seen way crazier things happen. He knew he had a good story. He believed in his story. He shaped it. I helped him shape it because he hired me to do that. And that's what you can do. You can hire people to help you along the way. But so I've seen that's even outside of the 4 first-time writers who sold 3 of the 4 to really big companies, okay? I think the secret to that, because all 4 of them were basing stuff on their own life. These are the ones who are my students, because when I train my writers, I always get you to start from your own life. And because I teach through a comedy lens, even though people write in other genres, I teach through a comedy lens. Comedy always starts with trauma, and I always get you to start with your own trauma because that's where the juice is going to be. That's where, like, your best work is going to be. Think about any comedian, and you scratch a comedian and you'll see, like, some deep tragedy in their life. Okay. So yeah, then, the speed at which all that happens and the amount of money you make, it's all up to, the cinema gods. I'm just seeing if I missed a step. So you can see that at some point along the way, you're definitely going to need a lawyer involved. At some point along the way, you may or may not have an agent or manager. Eventually, you will get one. If you go through all these steps without an agent or manager and the film gets made, you'll get one after. Like, you don't have to worry so much about that. Eventually, if something is in play, someone is giving you money, your film is getting made, agents will line up to talk to you, or managers will, at least, right? That's sort of how it goes. Yeah, so time check. Okay, I can stay on and take questions. I can tell you different ways I can help you, and other people can help you. Listen, I train story editors. I have several story editors in different countries. I train them through a program once a year called Story Editor Studio. The next one is January 26th. But I have people from past years I have one in LA, and one of her specialties before she trained with me as a story editor was assessing novels for a film production company. So there are people who I can recommend you to. You don't necessarily have to work with me, but also I would greatly encourage you that if you've never trained as a screenwriter, or if you have and you found it a really hard process, to try one of my film. I have a film a course called Make 'em Laugh for 90 Minutes. Now, I teach through a comedy lens. Comedy has extra skill sets than other genres. So I do get people who write in horror, in sci-fi, in all kinds of in drama. They get to train in that, plus the skill sets of comedy. But usually people are with me because of the process I teach and the way that I teach. It's not necessarily because of comedy, but they were created. Originally, my programs were created for comedians to translate their stand-up into writing for film and television. And I soon found that the most successful people were novelists. And I think it's a question of work ethic and actually, like, if you have certain pre-existing skills, you can go faster into this transition. There's a link tree on my YouTube channel. There's also a screenwriters playlist where you can get a sense of how I feel about certain subjects and talk about certain subjects on my screenwriters playlist. But on the link tree, you'll always see what courses I have available. The film and TV courses are always available, meaning you could do the core training, the 20 hours, like, at any point. It's online, pre-recorded on your own. And then it comes with a year of idea jams. So, Hugh, what is the usual number of people in your classes? So it varies. It really varies. When I used to teach it live, there were 20 to 40 like, I'd do 20 people. I'd do 2 classes of 20 in a day when I used to teach it live. This is before pre-pandemic. From 2012 to 2019, I taught it live, and it was 20 to 40. Not all of them would do writer's room. So the 20 to 40, like the 2 classes of 20, they would be in it for the training. And then in writer's room, it would be a smaller number. So the way that I teach, so to keep it sort of affordable and to keep it productive, the training is for everybody. So, right now there's 40 people in the feature class, and there's I want to say probably 60 in the TV class. That many people don't show up to idea jams. So you have the option of just doing the actual training on your own at your own pace, and then email me your premise, character work, and story structure. That those programs, the core training includes everything up to that. I don't give script feedback in those courses because if I did, it would raise the price by a lot. You can, if you have a script that you've written, use my script marketability assessment service. That's also in my link tree, where depending on the length of your script, I can give you exact. Oh yes, I'll get to the idea jams. So the idea jams, it's something, it's a phrase I created. So the idea jams give people a chance to log on with me in 5-week sessions multiple times a year. We're about to start our 4th session this year on November 16th. They're usually on Saturday morning. So Saturday at 11 a.m. Toronto time, we have people logging in from different time zones. Usually there's 4 to 10 people that show up at idea jams, depending. Like it's like, there's 60 people taking the TV course, but only a percentage of them will show up to idea jams. Idea jams are like so people can use their time. So let's say 10 people show up. It's a 90-minute class, so they'll each get 8 to 10 minutes, like to talk about whatever they want. Like they can use their time however they want. They can either use it to ask me a question, and you can also ask me questions on email. But most of the time, people will say, "I'm thinking about this. Can you look at my character work?" And we yes and, right? Especially because most people are writing comedy, so we're yes anding. We're just giving people ideas. The collective power of like jamming our brains, our creative brains, is really super fun, and it makes for accelerated script development. If people then will write the script on their own, or they will join me in a different course called Writers Room. Our next Writers Room starts in January. There's like a way to prepay for both and get a significant discount, or there's a way to do, or you can pay for them separately, or you can just do the training, get feedback from me on everything up to your structure of your story, and then write the script on your own and continue on your own. Either way is fine. I find the people who have sold stuff go with me all the way, and then they do one rewrite usually before they put it into market. I have a really I really believe in the process that way, because it's designed for fewer rewrites than you might expect in a regular process. People are always like, writing is rewriting. I say that writing is pre-writing. And if you make some choices ahead of time, so idea jams end up being fun. They just end up being like a lot of, how about this? How about this? And it's like, with the brain, it's like an improv, it's like having an improv troupe for writers is what it is. Our friend Janet Hetherington is always at the idea jam, whether or not she's working on, like sometimes people say, I'm here, but I don't need time. I just want to yes and for other people, because you're flexing your writing muscles that way too. So the people in the programs get a year of idea jams. They're 5-week sessions, so they're not on all year. I take little breaks in between, but yeah, it's usually 5 sessions a year. Sometimes there was one year during COVID, we did like 6 sessions of idea jams one year. But yeah, and then you get, and the feedback up to structure. In Writers Room, there's never more than 8. In fact, most of the time there's 4 people in Writers Room. Writers Room is the next stage. So if you want to work with me and a small group of your peers, it's another 5-week course where it's not pre-recorded. We work every single week for 4 hours on a Sunday. I'm trying to remember which Sunday in January it starts, but you can't really do Writers Room without having done the core training, so that we're all speaking the same language inside of Writers Room. So anyone who finishes From Shtick to Script or Make Them Laugh for 90 minutes and then submits, they have to submit at least their premise and character work for the script they want to write. It's even better if you also submit your story structure. And then I pick 8 projects. Usually it's like very, if you're not ready, I'll tell you, I'll say, there's more, you got to do more work on this, or this. But almost always everyone is pretty good about it. Like most of the time people have, as long as they've done premise and character work, they're invited into that class. And it's all on my website. You can see what the difference in price is if you pay together or separate. If you prepay, you have up to 2 years to claim a Writers Room spot. And I offer that program, the Writers Room, 4 times a year. And then there's Story Editors Studio, but I can also recommend story editors to you, or I can actually do a script marketability assessment where I give you feedback on your script. The price of that is based on length. Or you can fully hire me as your story editor, which also involves the Writers Guild of Canada, because I'm a member, but I also have some, and they're not, it's not like other unions. It's not like ACTRA, where if you sign a member, you're beholden for life to that union. No, it's not like that. You can have non-union writers and a union script consultant, or but if, you're not beholden to have a whole writing team that's union. If you hire a union story consultant, it's very different. Sorry, just give me 1 second. I'll be right back. I have I have allergies. I was just blowing my nose. Any other questions? It's amazing to me how often this question has come up. How do I turn my novel into a film? I think people are realizing there's financial, it is a process. It is a process, but it's a way to reach a wider audience with your work, and it is a way to make more money. Like, let's face it, the publishing industry has changed so much over the years. People don't get the kind of advances that they used to have, so it is usually more profitable to write a screenplay than it is to sell a book. I mean, it depends. Both can be profitable or not profitable, but it's a really great skill to have. I want to assure people that it's more attainable than you think, and especially if you already have writing experience in another genre. Anyone else have any questions? And by the way, it doesn't have to be a novel that you adapt. I've seen people adapt articles. I've seen people adapt short stories, novellas, you know, just and when I get people to work from their life, oh yeah, that's another thing that comes. Both my writing programs come with a process I created called the 5-day personal film and TV comedy series premise creation challenge. And I'll probably do one in January. I only do it a couple times a year. It is a 5-day process that I came up with to help you land a personal and comedic premise. That one is like the winner of the challenge gets a prize for it being personal, funny, and marketable, right? And it's an international competition that I run, and then the winner of film and the winner of TV, because they're different challenges, because they have different storytelling needs, gets a free spot in my programs. So I will figure out when in January I can do it, but I know I can do the next one in January. I have a lot going on before then. I'm launching a new Punch Up program. I haven't run it since 2020, and Punching Up is extracting the maximum funny from film and TV scripts. I'm finally launching. I did a beta version in 2020 that killed. It was really fun, and I just have not had the time and or the energy to do it. But now finally I'm committing to offering Punch It Up as well. So, and in Punch It Up, we do joke gyms and punch up gyms. So that's another thing I'm doing. I just don't stop. So, and no other questions? Yeah. So that is it clear sort of what idea jams are? They all take place on Zoom. When I used to teach it live, we would do it live in a classroom. I haven't really, I know Comedy Bar has said if I wanted to do a live, that maybe I would do a live over there, but I really love the online process because I get to work with people. Like in my writing programs, it's 7 different countries. In my script supervision program, which is the other side of my life, I have people in 28 countries. So it's really incredible to have a student body like that. But again, you can also hire me or anyone else privately to work with you one-on-one as well. Everything's outlined on the links in my link tree. I'll stay on if there's a few more questions. Again, feel free to explore my screenwriters playlist. And if there's anyone, I'm looking for my cohort for Story Editor Studio. You have to have screenwriting experience to be in Story Editor Studio. It's for story consultants. I have some interviews with some of my grads in Story Editor Studio. They're phenomenal. And you can also sort of see, oh yeah, I kind of want to work with Ali or Michael or any of the people that are on those panels. And there's more. I'm going to do another panel. I still have more students that I want you to meet that are making a living as story consultants. That's a really, and if you have a script, let's say you wrote a script and you want a free way to get notes, so when people take the Story Editor Studio program, we work on 14 scripts over the course of the practicum is 7 weeks, the training is 3 weeks, the practicum is 7. So we do 2 scripts per session. So the writer who comes in, or the story editor who comes in, or sometimes it's a producer or director, it's whoever comes in as the Story Editor Studio cohort participant, they get first dibs on whether they want to bring one of their own scripts or a client script. But let's say we don't have 14 scripts. Once 14 scripts are claimed, that's all the slots. Then I normally get to work with writers outside of the studio to sort of donate, 5 or more scripts to the process, because I want us to work on a variety. My story editors work on feature film, TV pilots, 1 hour, half-hour pilots, movies of the week, treatments. We work on all different genres, all different. So if you're in the audience and you've written a script and you want free notes from, it depends how many. I never take more than 20 people in Story Editor Studio, but it's usually more like 10. So usually you'll get like a set of notes from 10 story editors in training, and it always blows me away, the quality, because like they're hardcore into like, they do the 3 weeks intensive of training as a story editor, and then they get ravenously into like the projects. It's always phenomenal. And the writer has the option of coming to our class to hear the notes live or to get a recording. It's up to the writer, but it's really great when the writer's there and the story editors get the practice of giving them constructive and actionable feedback. And it's totally free to the writer. We all sign NDAs, so they can't just, talk about your script outside the program. That starts January 26th. So I'm trying to get people to send me scripts if they're interested by January 6th. I'm also trying to get into that program. People need to pre-interview with me because I want to make sure that you are a good fit. Like, you need to be able to speak the language that writers speak. You need to have some degree of screenwriting experience. I've had people in the past who are picture editors, film jury members, producers, directors, people who regularly have to give notes to writers. Sorry, see how sweaty I am. In that program, you don't necessarily have to be a writer, but, we'll determine in the pre-interview if you'll feel lost or not. The last thing I want is for people to feel lost in that class, because we move fast. At least with the regular, training programs, you can kind of go at your own pace and determine your own schedule pretty much. Any other questions? Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate your attention. This is the most people I've had it alive in a while. Usually people watch it after the fact. Feel free to reach out to me at mondocinema@gmail.com, or you can just click on the link tree, click on one of the pages. It'll have my email address on most of those pages for the courses. Feel free to set up a talk with me if you need to. Otherwise, I hope to see some of you guys in Idea Jams. We start next Saturday on the 16th. And I bet some of my students have tuned in. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to go like wipe the sweat off my face. Thank you, Commentary. I love that your screen name is Commentary. Thanks, everyone. I'll leave the recording up, so tell your friends if they want to see this. Thank you for the question. It's a great question, and it affects a lot of writers, so I hope it helps some of you. Thank you.